Welcome to today's special edition of InvestorIdeas.com Cleantech and Climate Change podcast, looking at today's problems and solutions for the future. Today we're talking to well-known solar analyst J. Peter Lynch. Peter has worked for 36 years as a Wall Street security analyst, an independent security analyst, and private investor in small emerging technology companies. He's been actively involved in following developments in the renewable energy sector, particularly solar, since 1977, and is regarded as an expert in this field. Peter discusses that this is a year of solar and how for the first time solar has economics solidly on its side. Solar and green publicly traded companies mentioned in this interview include SunPower, First Solar, Single Point, Canadian Solar, Jinko, Hannon Armstrong Sustainable Infrastructure, Tesla, and BYD. Thanks for joining us today, Peter. You haven't been on our show for quite a while, and our listeners have always looked to you for expertise in the solar space. So can you tell them a little bit about your background and how you have witnessed the solar industry go through all the recent changes from the 70s up till now and the success it's seeing today?
Sure. I first started getting involved in the solar industry in the late 70s when I got out of graduate school, when I was an analyst on Wall Street, and basically we worked with all the first startup companies in the solar industry, and we actually took most of them public. So I've really been involved with this industry really since the beginning, and it's had its stops and starts because of subsidies and the way everything was handled, and of course all the fossil fuel companies get massive subsidies, but they're not as obvious as a tax credit. So that's all changing now because solar is finally cheaper without subsidies than any other form of energy generation. So people all around the world, you're starting to see companies putting in solar projects rather than starting a new coal plant, a natural gas plant, and we're almost at the point where if the CEO asks the CFO what we should do, the CFO, if he wants to keep his job, is going to say, solar project is cheaper than anything else. That's what we should do. It's the best return on investment. So for the first time, solar actually has the economics solidly on their side.
Well, I read recently that the U.S. solar market just had their strongest first quarter in its history. So looking at that, looking at the residential market in particular, accessibility and affordability, as you've mentioned, have really changed the market dynamics. So do you think residential will be one of the biggest revenue drivers and generators in the solar sector?
Yeah, I think that residential will get stronger. One of the stocks in that area is a company called SunPower, and that's a company that has a very, very high efficiency panel. So consequently, as a result of that, you need fewer panels on a roof to get the same effect. So that's really ideal, and it's focused on the residential area. Other areas that are related to residential, such as community solar, will also really start to boom. Community solar is if a little village or town decide they want to have solar, you can put a big solar farm in a baseball field somewhere, and then everyone in the town or village buys a portion and gets allocated that. So it's the same thing as having solar on your roof, except it's not on your roof, but you're getting the same benefits. That's another area that's really going to grow.
One of the companies that we're reporting on in this article, actually Single Point and their subsidiary Direct Solar, just announced they did over $3.4 million in contracts in 60 days, and they're a small company comparatively in this sector. Do you think that's reflective of what we're going to see across the board? And if companies that survived, from being in this sector before and didn't make it, if they're still there or they're there and they're new, do you think that that's a trend that we should see moving forward?
I think you'll see a lot of smaller companies starting up, and I think what will happen this time around is that as they start to get bigger and bigger sales, you're going to see them get bought by some of the big solar companies. The Chinese solar companies, Canadian Solar and Jinko are two of the biggest, and they're doing very well right now. I mean, they can't build enough panels the demand is so great. And in the United States, First Solar can't build enough panels to keep up with the demand. And First Solar, for those of you who are interested, has the best balance sheet in any company in the solar industry. So they are well managed financially. And there's another company that you may look at called Hannon Armstrong, and the symbol is HASI. And what's unique about them is they're the first company that's ever done what they do. Some of you may have heard of a type of company called a REIT, R-E-I-T. So an example would be they buy apartment buildings, and shareholders get a dividend based on the rents they collect. And by law, a REIT must pay out 90% of the rents they collect. HASI is the first solar and wind REIT. They buy wind farms, efficiency situations, and solar farms, and pay a fair dividend, probably right now between 5 and 6%, and the stock is just starting to get picked up by large institutional investors in New York.
One of the things we're seeing across the board is a real shift in investor sentiment driven by millennials and what will be the next generation. And they're a kind of investor that are looking at the old mindset of buy what you know, buy what you like. And they're investing in green and sustainable companies. One of their biggest stocks they love is Tesla. They're investing in the cannabis space. They have been a big driver of the success of Beyond Meat, a plant-based food replacement. So I guess what we see and what's exciting potentially, and if you can talk about that, is that this investor is just going to keep moving forward. They're not going to go backward with this mindset. They really believe that we have to change the way we live, the way we invest, and that we should be investing in things that do good, not just make money. So what do you think about that? And do you think that will be a driving force to really keep the solar market in particular as an investment, as a product, and keep it for the future? Because as you said, we've seen it have its ups and downs before. But do you think this will be something that maybe just keeps the momentum going?
I think it will contribute. But once again, in the past, the reason solar had its up and downs is it was depending on tax credits. Now, for the first time, the economics are on solar's side. Even in places like Australia, who have a government that denies that the Earth is round, they're still getting overwhelmed with solar projects. The numbers just don't work anymore. And as for Tesla, a lot of people think it's a scam or this or that, but Elon Musk is a hero of the planet, whether Tesla makes it or not, because he's the one who moved the electric car 10 years ahead of where it would have been. So he is a tremendous inspiration and one of the great contributors to that area. Along with that, another big area you're going to see is batteries. And there's some very interesting battery companies. There's one in China called BYD, Build Your Dreams. I think the symbol is BYDDF. They're the largest battery manufacturer in China, and their first large investor was Warren Buffett, who owns 20% of the company. So that's an interesting one. And as solar and wind start to grow faster and faster, you're going to see the battery industry follow it right up, because the batteries are going to need to be used when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing.
So in closing, again, turning to your expertise, what are you most excited about right now in the solar space, and what are you hoping to see down the road in this industry?
Well, since I've been involved in all those up and downs, and it's extremely, I thought solar was going to explode in 1982. So I'm about 30 years late. What I see now that's most exciting is, as I've stated a couple times previously here, this is the first time that economics, dollars and cents, are on solar's side. And anyone who looks at Apple Computer, Google, Microsoft, they're all building large solar farms to power their servers, because the economics, it's the cheapest. It's the cheapest way to go. And that's the thing that's most exciting, and we're going to keep it going. And millennials, they're all for solar. And in the United States, believe it or not, when you survey people, the number one thing they want is for the country, the United States, to use more solar and wind. And the second thing they want is legalization of cannabis. So I guess the millennials are driving the truck here.
To hear more podcasts, visit the podcast page at investorideas.com at www.investorideas.com/audio. And a reminder, you can also hear our podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, and Google Play Music. To help you follow and track clean tech and renewable energy stocks, Investor Ideas has created a directory of publicly traded companies in this sector. To learn more, visit investorideas.com/membership. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimer and disclosure at investorideas.com at investorideas/about-disclaimer.asp. And this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investment involves risk and possible loss of investment. For disclosure purposes, Single Point, OTCQB, SING, mentioned in this interview is a paid PR news and social media client on investorideas.com. Learn more about our services and for articles and podcasts at investorideas.com/news-upload.